Hey, what's up, Scott?
Hello.
Hello. Cool. So we got Scott Breitenother here. He is the founder of Brooklyn Data Company and co-founder of Locally Optimistic, among a bunch of other stuff that you've accomplished. So um, Scott and I, we've known each other, I think almost a year now. We got
Coming
connected
up on
in
our
the
anniversary.
coming up in the anniversary, so we figured we'd do something special for our anniversary. Um, and yeah, you're somebody that I really like talking to. We've had these kind of cadence chats for a while, and we have similar businesses, and I think you got a very interesting story. So why don't you tell people about yourself?
Sure. Ooh. I mean, how far back you want to go? Should I talk about what I'm doing now, or you want the whole journey of my being?
Um, however far back it is relevant. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. I mean, I'll go back a little bit. I mean, to add flavor. I mean, way back when, kind of my first job was in management consulting, and where I was very technical and analytical, but like Excel was my jam. Um, which I think people make fun of me for that in the data world. I still am phenomenal at Excel and think it's a phenomenal tool. But then I really learned analytics at Casper when I was an early employee there. Somehow managed to come in and be kind of employee number 16 and data hire number one. Um, and built out a 16-person data team over 4 years and basically learned everything. Um, and then I kind of wanted to get my hands dirty again, and so I started my own consultancy, Brooklyn Data, and that was, I would say September 2018. And so in the last 2 years, we've grown Brooklyn Data to a team of 17 people. We essentially provide fractional data and analytics team as a service, work with really cool companies of all shapes and sizes, to help them build out their data capabilities.
That's awesome. Yeah, you guys have had I think, a very amazing growth trajectory. So congrats on that. That's awesome.
Thank,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. No stress at all running a business, of course, right?
Whew.
So yeah. So I mean, walk me through that real quick. I mean, what possessed you to, I guess, to go out on your own and start a company that usually takes kind of either have to be a lunatic or really
Yeah.
dedicated to this craft. So
I mean, I think that's a really good question. Like, I think when you're in data, you kind of get to this point where when you're leading a data function, you're kind of at this juncture and where you say, "Hey, I'm a head of data. What do I do next?" And the options really are, oversimplifying. Do it again. Just go somewhere else, smaller, bigger, earlier, more complex, different industry, and just lather, rinse, repeat, and just keep doing it. Um, there is jump to another role. So, as a head of data, you actually have a really good view of the entire company, and so you could theoretically could be a COO or CEO. You could start another company, start your own company in another industry, or you can go, option number four, which is what I chose, which is kind of go into a professional services role and start kind of consulting. And you kind of like when you look backwards, your career kind of feels like this straight line that's super thoughtful. When you're looking forward, you're just like, what do I do next? Um, and kind of like it's kind of built on it. I started in management consulting, learned kind of how to jump out of a helicopter into a new industry and learn it really quickly and come up with a recommendation. I learned startups in the modern data stack, and dumb luck ended up working with a lot of the tools that have become super popular, like DBT and Looker and those tools, and now it's kind of led to me combining those and just doing what I love, which is honestly working on really cool, hard data problems all the time because you only truly bring in a consultant when it's a challenging data problem. And so I get, my day is literally jumping from challenging data situation one to challenging situation two in a different company, industry, um, working with different people, different stack. Honestly, it's like a fun little dopamine rush, my whole day.
how do you, I mean, how did you develop the skills to sort of context switch like that, as you say, helicopter jump? I mean, that doesn't come easily to people.
Yes, that's so. I can. This is my bizarre way of thinking of it, but basically, there are several like there will be regular inflection points in your growth. It's kind of like a step function, where at a certain point you get to a number of like, the first one's moving from working on one company to multiple companies at the same time. The next is like multiple companies, even more like, but there's different levels. And I noticed basically every single level, like you get to a point where your like brain literally feels like it's leaking out of your ears and you have like no freaking clue and you're confusing people's names and stacks and contexts. But two things happen. First, you have to set up processes. So like if you know, we have let's see, we have Slack channels, then we have Google Drive folders and distribution groups, distribution lists, and one password vaults and all sorts of systems that actually like make it much, much easier, both as like me, but also onboarding new folks to a multi-client context. And then you kind of get used to it. And so like it's this combination of like it almost feels like every 6 months I've just had this moment where like this is not manageable, and then you put in the processes, and again the processes could very well be delegation, but you essentially adjust how you're operating the business and put the tools in to be more efficient, and then you kind of just get used to it. And honestly, I like I feel like a Olympic context switcher. It's like it actually feels like it's a muscle. You spend more the more time you spend on it, the better you get. And honestly, I think it's made me a better like leader and just focusing on the important things, being able to jump into a meeting, understand context, get people to a conclusion and a decision and move on. Um, you know, I'm really loving consulting, and this is where I want to be for at least the next decade. If I do end up going back to work at a company, like this context switching skill, I think is going to make me a far better kind of leader.
Hmm. Yeah, I can empathize with that. I think, again, our business, I think, we're in a related field. I think our approaches are like almost tangential, actually. So, um, which is why we have good conversations. I think we pick
Yeah.
things up from each other. But yeah, I can totally agree with the context switching becoming like a muscle, really, uh, for better or for worse, right? But yeah, because I mean, every environment's different, every client's different, teams are different, everyone's
And
different.
I can tell you, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It is
Hmm.
almost kind of like I just can't imagine dealing with one industry and one company all the
Hmm.
time. Again, I'm sure I will do that at some point, but it's very exciting just to have the variety. Like, you know, if you had asked me, you know, when I was at Casper, what the best data stack is, well, I'd say, I'm on Redshift and Stitch
Hmm.
and DBT and Looker, and I like it. I checked out a couple other tools, and it's, but I ultimately demoed and like the stack. I mean, I get to play in every single major like cloud platform. I get to be in lots of different industries, and it really helps you form, opinions. You can have greater pattern recognition because you get not only do you get kind of more repetitions, but you get to see kind of diverse situations, so you can see what is common and what is different. And like I don't know, I've kind of moved to from being, I would say, like an expert in direct to consumer e-commerce analytics to like the craft of building data capabilities, which I think, yes, you do lose a little bit of depth in an industry, but I think I've gained such a wealth of knowledge on just like what makes a data capability successful. And the capability is not just technology, it's people, it's process, it's like that whole ball of kind of characteristics that that you use to deliver value using data to an organization.
I mean, walk me through that. What are some of the, I guess, the design patterns or the commonalities that you're seeing across industries that would make a company successful with data?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, these are, there's a lot of, I say there's a lot of ways you can kind of get yourself in trouble by not setting up infrastructure correctly. So I think it's like a commonality is taking the time to set up, even to something as, it's kind of, people move from Redshift to Snowflake because it's so much easier. But I also think you still have to be thoughtful and spend time setting it up. And so that transcends all industries. Now there are special characteristics like, if you're in healthcare, you need to think about things like HIPAA compliance. If you're in kind of, you know, dealing with credit card data, it's PCI compliance. There are different chapters in that book, but kind of setting up that core infrastructure um, transcends all industries. I think just having a good solid team, good communication, good structure. Again, those are patterns. And then I think the last one I would say is like we've worked with a lot of folks, that have come to like a lot of our clients have come to us and said, "Hey, we're looking to do kind of machine learning or something really advanced." And I think, another common pattern is like is that there's a lot of value in slowing down and focusing on fundamentals. Like, it's hey, let's focus on being able to correctly say what sales were and your return rate was yesterday. And then again, we can revisit this in 6 months on
Mhm.
kind of whether to do something more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
there's no like, I wish I had some sort of magical answer. It's just like being thoughtful, doing it right, not rushing, and just like having patterns and frameworks.
Hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that winning with data, it's as much. I think most of the time it's just the organizational will and the discipline to make it happen, right? Tools come and go as we know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned your experience with Redshift and all that stuff back in the day, and now Redshift
I love how
is
Redshift is back in the day.
right.
I totally agree.
Yeah, that wasn't even that long ago, actually, in the grand scheme of things. But it's just funny that the world just keeps moving on, and like relentlessly too. New tools all the time. I mean, how do you keep on top of the latest and greatest stuff coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do a lot of reading, a lot of reading. Um, I just and to be honest, it is so much easier than it was, 3, 4, 5 years ago. There are great newsletters. There's communities like Locally Optimistic where people are sharing like, honestly, I think if you literally just joined Locally Optimistic and just read what people are saying, I mean, fair play. It is a slightly bit of an echo chamber. I think as it grows, there's more diverse opinions, but everybody does have some sort of bias for the modern, cloud data stack, which I agree with that stack, and that's the approach that kind of we subscribe to. But again, I think it's just helpful to have a community. And to be honest, like I remember when I was first transitioning from management consulting to Casper, and I was trying to like figure out problems, like big problems like how to design a data team, small problems, how to deal with timestamps, and like I had a few friends that I made that I would ask questions to, and I'd grab coffee dates with people and ask them, but I really it was a lot of work and it took a lot of time. I think folks in data these days have so many great advantages of these really great communities, just like open communities where there are no stupid questions. Again, like I think you have to make sure you're asking a thoughtful question, not like a one that there's like a "let me Google this for you" response, but just like
Right.
if you're asking a smart question, or even if you're early on, it's like, "Hey, I tried these things. Can you point me in the right direction?" I'm kind of jealous. I wish we had these scale communities when I was first starting, because again, it's just phenomenal for not only like keeping on top of what's going on, but just forming connections. Like that's how you and I met. Like
Right.
and I mean, like we've never met each other. I've never seen you below the shoulders. And someday when people meet people again, I would love to grab a beer with you. Uh,
Likewise. Yep.
but again, it's a strange, weird world. But I just truly love I love the sense of community that we've developed.
Yeah. I mean, my background too. I've been doing in-person meetups for many years. In fact, tomorrow we have the seventh or eighth year anniversary for our Python meetup that we've been doing, right? And so, but I could definitely, I could tell people these days it's. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like you're in the golden age right now of you being able to learn kind of anything you want in data, right?
Yeah.
Even 5 years ago, it was a lot harder. You didn't have the communities, or if you did, like you didn't have Slack communities for one, right? So you typically have to go find blog posts. There might be forums. You can go to Stack Overflow.
I did a lot of Stack Overflow.
Mhm. Meetups are
Yeah.
another one, right? But that's high friction too. It's like maybe once a month or something like that, and you gotta
Yeah.
commute to it and all that kind of stuff. And what's interesting and during COVID is like all of a sudden there's these virtual meetups, virtual events basically every like many times a day. You could basically spend your entire day just in events with
Well,
people.
what do you think we're going to keep, and what do you think we're going to lose? Like from when again, when people see people again, like I wonder, like are virtual meetups here to stay? Like because I think you run a meetup that's very local to your area of the world, but it's virtual, so anybody can attend. Brooklyn Data, we're hosting the DBT New York meetup next week. Again, open to everybody around the world.
Right.
I don't know. It's kind of cool, but I also kind of miss like the hyper localness. Like I don't think there is a right or wrong answer.
I think it's
I,
going to
I
be a
guess
mix of
hybrid.
both.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be a mix of both. Like, typically in our Python anniversary parties, we meet up at a restaurant, get some beers, and go over war stories and all the fun stuff that you do in person, right? But the interesting thing is, like, I also run like the Utah Data Engineering Meetup and like a few other what used to be local events. But what's changed recently is like the speakers that we're getting are from all over the world and like globally recognized leaders. Uh,
yeah,
so to have that caliber of speaker coming to your meetup um, I would just say a lot. It's a privilege for sure, and you would never be able to do that in a physical meetup environment for probably a lot of reasons, right? Like who's going to
yeah,
fly in to give a 1 hour talk, whereas nowadays that's not terribly difficult. And so, and the fact you get to meet all these different people around the world, we have people showing up from all over the world to our events. Salt Lake City, like a lot of people don't even know where that is when you get outside the U.S., especially, and but people, from all over the world are showing up to these events. You'll find the same thing with your DBT meetup
yeah.
for a number of reasons. So I think, I mean, I don't plan on getting rid of virtual events anytime soon. I think it'll be definitely coupled with probably more interesting in-person events.
Hmm.
The things I would like to change about meetups is definitely, I think there was a certain cadence to meetups where it's like, you have your pizza and beer or whatever
Yeah.
before, right? And then you have the talk, and then you have the networking after. I call it the meetup sandwich. So it's like
Yeah, yeah, I know what
things
you're
I
talking
found
about.
interesting though, and the reason that people
Yeah,
show up to meetups was because they wanted to network with people, right? The talk is almost a formality in some ways.
yeah.
And so if you can preserve those talks in posterity, maybe just do them virtually and have the in-person meetup being like kind of more of a
Just
networking
the pizza
event,
and beer
then
part.
mhm.
Yeah. I no, I think that's fair. I know it's interesting. Well, we will see whenever it is people meet in person. I look forward to attending one of your meetups.
Likewise, yeah, I'd like to spend more time on the East Coast too. Just change the scenery, but yeah, whenever that happens. So take you up on that deal, and vice versa. Come out here and go snowboarding and check out the wilderness. So,
Perfect.
yeah. It's interesting though. And the locally optimistic. Let's talk about that for a sec. I mean, you're one of the co-founders of locally optimistic. Um,
Yeah. I mean, that was I would it's all dumb luck, I would say. Like basically, I guess it was we launched the blog April 1st, 2018. 2018? Something like April 1st, 2018. I mean, basically, um, Michael, um, Sam, and I, we were kind of looking for. I think we were looking for fulfillment outside of our normal day-to-day data lives. We loved data. We wanted to do something in data, but we wanted to do something that wasn't selling razors for Michael, mattresses for me. Um, and so we kind of thought about starting a blog, and then we needed to coordinate communication for the blog somehow. So we started a Slack channel. We started adding our friends because we wanted to somehow convince them to write articles for the blog because we didn't want to write all of them. And then we just started adding more people. And then, I mean, one thing, it was I think the key thing was inviting the right people and setting that core early community. And essentially, up until about 500 members, you know, the kind of the co-founders of Locally Optimistic had to initiate all conversations. Not all, most. We had to like if someone said something, we had to reply. We had to be sharing articles. But then after like 500, it kind of started a life of its own. And honestly, like with the addition of Caitlin Mormon to the group, and the virtual events that she set up, it's actually like become even better.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. I take no credit other than kind of than dumb luck and being in the right time, right place at the right time. But honestly, that's like I've been working from home for I don't know 2.5 years. This this is my like these are my work friends. They're my kind of my office relationships. Again, like I have my Brooklyn data colleagues, but it's funny. I recognize people's names, and you reply to the same people, and there's like, just like this sense of community. And I hope people are. It's been very helpful while people have been working from home and kind of being that kind of network and giving people that human contact. But yeah, I say right place, right time. Astounded by the community it's become, and just grateful for everybody for making it like such an open place where people can ask questions and we can learn. And like I'm thrilled. Could never have imagined it would come out like this.
That's so cool. And you're right. The vibe of locally optimistic Slack group is it's always been positive. It's kind of cool. I've noticed it's almost a self-reinforcing culture in a way
Yeah,
where
for better for worse.
yeah, for better for worse, it's hard to manage. What is it? It's 3,000 people now, or
I don't know. I think it was like 2,800 people. That's the last time I checked.
let's see. Yeah, 2,800. That's great,
Oof,
man. It's like a small town.
2881. And you know what the funny thing is to get in, there's two ways to get into locally optimistic. You can have someone who's already in there send a link to invite you, or you can go to our webpage and email the admins. And it still is us just manually replying and manually inviting. But when I say us, I think I stopped contributing to that like 6 months ago, and I think it's a lot of Michael Kaminsky just like on fire, just knocking out replies. But it still is like we still review everybody's email before that we let them in.
It's smart. Yeah, I mean, because it just takes like one bad apple to screw it all up, right? And um, whereas with an invitation, for example, like there's definitely the reputational stake. So you're not going to refer anybody in who's
Yeah.
going to be a dick. So it's just kind of how it is. Um,
But I mean, we still like we still have to like I think every 6 months or so there's like a new kind of like risk or threat to the community, and like
mhm.
one of the things recently that we've noticed is just a lot of vendor related kind of content, and like you and I are vendors at this point, so I think we're part of the problem, not the solution. And so we had to put in some rules to essentially say, hey vendors, if you're posting, you have to post in the vendor content channel. I think like just like at various stages of growth. And also I think that's a reflection of just like how hot data is and how many new data technologies there are. Um, Again, it's pros and cons. I think it's like just finding that balance where people are getting access to resources, getting the ability to like Slack George from Fivetrend directly,
Mhm.
um, but also not feeling like you're bombarded by kind of random vendors. Like it's like this. How do you preserve this really cool connection where you can ask a question about a tool, your colleagues and your peers can give their perspective, the person from the tool can give their perspective, but it doesn't feel salesy. And I think we've managed to do it,
Yeah,
but
I think you've
it's
done a
tough.
good job, I think, self-containing the vendors. So I just looked at the member count in the vendor channel. It's like 129 people or 110 people. Sorry. So, I mean, I think that definitely signals like where people's interests are, right? Because that particular channel is kind of hilarious, where it's just I think vendors just posting stuff. So it's like this kind of pitch echo chamber in a way.
Yeah,
I have noticed too that the sneaky way vendors will go around is kind of I think more kind of doing developer relation stuff. So but I think it's great, right? Because if you're answering questions about a product, like I noticed this in the Looker channel, for example, or the Snowflake channel, you'll have engineers, but it's kind of this mix of like Stack Overflow, in Slack, Slack Overflow.
yeah,
You're answering like legit questions for people though, right? So I think I personally feel that's fine because it's contributing to the discussion and it's not
yeah.
salesy. It's not like, oh, let me answer your question and then give you a coupon to go,
But
to our
I
next
think it's
webinar.
also because like you have those people like in those channels that are answering those questions are not salespeople.
Right.
They're like, it was like Fabio in the Looker channel is always answering everybody's questions like super quickly with helpful comments. Like he's not, he doesn't have commission for when Looker sales, happen. He just wants to be helpful, and he's
Hmm.
passionate and knowledgeable. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Carlin from Snowflake, like just really great people that are just active community members, and also like not only contributing to answer questions about their platform, but kind of the other tools. You know, it's cool. I love it. I mean, let's see how. Hopefully, we can keep it as this like beautiful utopia for as long as possible.
Seems to be working. I know even with my own meetups too, right? Like, I mean, Ternary, we partner with a lot of companies, and it's a fine balance. I mean, we have plenty of our partners come present at meetups, but I have to be very upfront with even partners. It's like this
Hmm.
isn't. Don't do sales pitches. We
Yeah.
don't take any money from people because we don't want to have any financial
Yep.
ties to company, right? Our take is like if you're going to promote your stuff, bring swag. If you're being douchey and pitching people too much, we're going to boot you. And I don't care if you're a partner or not a partner. It's just we
Yeah.
want because it's about the community at the end of the day. And even with my company, I'm not sitting there pitching about what we do. If you ask, I can we can set up another call sometime. But there's a time and place I think to pitch, and there's a time and place to uh, contribute to a community, and I think they're totally separate. So.
Yeah, and I would say like our sales strategy, honestly, at Brooklyn Data is to be helpful
Mhm.
to people. And I'm sure you feel the same way. It's just like you give people advice and some will kind of go on their way and some people say, hey, that person's super insightful and super knowledgeable. I think they can come here and solve this problem for us.
Mhm.
And so like, I don't know, I as we grow out Brooklyn Data, like right now, we're basically all data people. As we start to add like sales and kind of other aspects that are just like inevitable as we grow, it's like I want to do it right and thoughtfully and tastefully, and you don't want to have that account person. Like even like our people managers and our project managers, like we call them engagement managers at Brooklyn Data, are former senior analysts. They're data people, and so like I don't know, I it may be inevitable at some point at a certain scale. I mean, and hopefully that scale is far, far away, and eventually we do get to it. But just like just a thought leadership led sales approach, I think is just so core to like my ethos and also Brooklyn Data's ethos. And
Mhm.
honestly, being salesy feels weird to me. I've tried it before. I I you know what I mean?
Totally understand. Yeah, I feel a lot of the same way too. It's this weird art form of like selling without selling, right?
Mhm.
So, but I think people like you and I, though, we have this different street cred because we're both practitioners versus
I
somebody.
think whatever the nerdy word for street cred is, I think we have. I think street cred sounds too cool.
It is actually too cool. So, we got keyboard cred.
Keyboard cred. I think I'm gonna keep that one.
Or pocket protector tread or whatever. But I mean, yeah, I mean, we've been in the trenches, we've done the work, right? And we work with people that have done the work, so
Yeah.
we can speak to, uh, I think, a customer's problems a lot more deeply than just a salesperson who hasn't had that experience, just because we can empathize with what the customer's going through and where they need to go, frankly, in their journey.
Yeah.
So again, we take different approaches. I mean, for Ternary, we're turning more into, I would say, a content first, education based company. We've long, I wouldn't say long, but we're definitely ditching like full scale services because it's just not what we're genetically wired for. Like
Yeah.
we're teachers, and so but you have a different approach and it works. I think it goes to show too in this industry. There's so many different facets that you could the ways you could succeed. So.
I have a question for you. The one of the things that throws me very often, and I think maybe I'm just have such a myopic view of the world. I'm just always shocked when people can't. I feel like everybody needs to have a handful of topics that they can go deep on. Like and so like often you come across data folks and then you start to you scratch the surface and you try to find that deep area and like there's no depth. Like I don't know. I've always found that my excitement and passion for data comes from a deep and technical knowledge of the underpinnings of, you know, and all the people I've had the most conversations with, it comes from a deep and passionate knowledge of some sort of aspect. And it's not the same technology, but like I feel like everybody should have some one topic that they could do like an extemporaneous like 20-minute talk on, and just like sorting distribution keys. I don't know, GCP versus AWS, or like ETL versus ELT, but just like I don't know. I just love that depth of knowledge. Like, am I just do I have some sort of warped view of the world, or what do you think?
No, yeah, I think it depends on like the person you're talking to, I suppose. I mean, honestly, a lot of people just take the path of least resistance, right? So they're gonna know what they need to get their job done. But then after that, that's just, you
I was
know,
saying just like, and again, it doesn't need to be a super technical topic, but just like
yeah.
go deep somewhere. Be like
Mhm.
be T-shaped, like
Yeah, I
again.
agree. The data world right now is interesting because it's what I see a lot of people doing is they'll focus a lot on tooling, but they won't focus on the underlying principles involved or the
Agreed.
underlying considerations or understanding basic technologies like Unix, for example, or
Mhm.
SQL. Right? It's like, oh, I'm really performant at this like platform du jour right now. But how does it work? I have no idea. It just does stuff. So
Yeah.
that's I kind of noticed that. I think part of it is the way data is taught now. I think is different than maybe it was. Like I got
I love
into
how everything we say makes us sound so old.
well,
It's
I
not like
mean,
it's not like it
many
used to
people.
be.
No, like it used to be. Yeah, we're like totally curmudgeon. Um, no, it is interesting though. I think because there's like if you wanted to get into data science right now, like there's
Hmm.
a certain I would say stock curriculum that people teach. So here's how here's how you make a model. Here's
Hmm.
how here's how you tune a model, all this other kind of stuff, or an analytics, for example, right? Like data viz, all this other stuff. But I think it's yeah, I think about this often because I also teach at a university too. So I'm like,
Hmm.
how do you engage somebody to go deep on something, right? That's always been a question in my mind. So I think people are capable of going deep. I just don't know if you don't have the incentive to go deep, then you won't go deep. So
But again, I think that's like the part of you that is correct or broken inside that makes you go deep is the part of you that makes you a good data person.
okay.
I just like it's like that the down part of the T is your foundation.
Hmm.
It's the thing that if you look at data leaders, people that are leading data functions, they come from so many different backgrounds,
Oh
but they
yeah.
always have a handful of like there's aspects of the job that they know well enough to manage people, but there's always going to be that aspect where they're just like the expert. And so
Hmm.
I just think it's just so important to have, again, it doesn't, it could be LookML, it could be Viz, it could be, you know, Python, like just, or a specific package or Airflow or something like that, but just like pick something and just be the best at it, because there truly are no barriers. Like
Hmm.
you've got your communities, you've got your knowledge bases, great documentation. Um, like truly anybody, even aspire like folks earlier in their career or people even in school that are aspiring to data careers, pick one thing and know it better than anybody else.
Yeah, I totally agree. My career advice is to people is always kind of zig while other people zag, and the zig is, I
Ooh.
think, like you say, if you can become an expert in something, like in the upper 99th percentile, for example, in something that's useful and has marketability, then you're almost assured to, to find work. And so, yeah, it's just, but it requires like a constant investment in yourself, right? And
Agreed.
that's tough for some people, but I would say it's these days too, though, it's, if you're a data professional, you're not just competing with people in your local market. I think if COVID's exposed anything, you're competing against everyone in the world at this point, especially in data. Like there's no barrier to entry in data, which also means there's no barrier to entry in the for a lot of jobs either. Now, obviously, there's some regulations that prohibit people, but
Yeah.
I mean, you are competing in a lot of ways with everybody at this point, so you got to be good at something.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. It's also I I think that if you are knowledgeable asterisk in something that's in demand, you will find a great professional career, and therefore you will find money. Like, it's just like I always advise people, follow the learning, go in the place where you will learn the most and get the most exposure, and just like develop yourself intellectually, and truly everything else will follow.
Hmm. Yeah, it does require, I would say, a sense of curiosity that's, you know, I think you can develop it, but if you don't know you have it, then it's also hard, right?
Yeah.
So I think part of it is just, letting people recognize what they're capable of learning and achieving, and that's almost half the battle sometimes. I think there's a big imposter syndrome in data, right?
Yeah.
It's a daunting industry. There's a lot of smart people here in data. What are you talking, analytics, data science, or whatever? It's a giant industry. It's hard to know where to even start, where to migrate if you have started, and everything changes, right? So I mean, we were talking earlier about Redshift and how that was like
Oh,
hot
old,
back in the
old,
day.
old. I mean,
Yeah, that's old
was it
hat now.
launched in 2012 or something? Ugh.
you know, and and who knows what's next, right? And you got to keep up on stuff. I mean, I heard Stuart Brand, the old technologist. I mean, he referred to it as a steamroller of technology, and just if you're not staying ahead of it, you're just going to get ruthlessly crushed, and it's just how it is.
Yeah, I find if I'm not reading my newsletters, reading my newsletters, reading my newsletters and the blogs, and keeping up with the community, I would say I can put it off for a couple weeks, but after like
Hmm.
4 to 6 weeks, I actually do feel like I've missed. Like, again, like, I think it's the micro, which is just really understanding specific technologies and companies that have raised or launched features, and it's the macro, with just like the zeitgeist of, you know this thing that we are calling the modern data stack, this thing that we're calling analytics engineer, that just like, I mean, I remember when the term analytics engineer was just starting to pop up, and we're like, all of us at locally optimists were talking like, one of us should write a blog post, and Michael is like a phenomenal blog post writer, and so he wrote one, and it's like the definitive article
Hmm.
on what is an analytics engineer, and I think that's just like, it just felt like such a natural evolution of the conversations that we were having. But you only truly pick that up if you are steeped in the community
Hmm.
and just kind of almost getting it through osmosis. Um, so I don't know. I think it's a constant investment, and you know I've had people ask me like, how do you keep on top of it? And I think we all have to have our mechanisms. Like, I'll start every day and I'll end every day by cleaning out all my unreads and locally optimistic, and I'll do a few
Yeah.
points in between, because you truly can't read them as they go anymore.
Hmm.
Um, but you also don't want to miss anything, and you follow the like. I also think one of my pro tips is following threads, so that you can see updates even if you aren't tagged or part of it, um, and just following conversations. But like, you just kind of have to create your practices and boundaries around those practices so they don't consume your whole time. But they are truly part of your job. Like, I do my job better. I understand data better because I am participating and active in these communities.
Totally agree. Same approach, right? So have a bunch of articles queued up on the iPad, read through those. I mean, at any given time, there's probably 100 articles queued up, and usually through the week, those are consumed and on to the next ones, right? And it's interesting because I think people like you and I would develop a filter after a while for like what's actually going to be important to read because there's
Yeah,
no shortage of noise out there, right?
yeah.
Um, then I don't know what you think, but like I also try and look at the underlying patterns too. I did this with machine learning way back in the day, where it's like it's supposed to have been 2013 maybe. I started noticing a pattern in machine learning where it was like the algorithms piece was actually going to be really easy to solve. Automated machine learning was going to, I think,
Hmm.
and packages that would build models. It's like that's going to be pretty standard fare. The hard part's going to be the engineering and the deployment and all that stuff behind the scenes. And so that's kind of why I got more into data engineering. But it took being steeped in that, I think, as you say, osmosis, to really recognize that that was sort of what the next waves were going to be. This is meanwhile while everybody was getting into machine learning and learning how to make models. And it's like, well, that's going to be old hat pretty soon. So we'll focus here. And And only now, I think I would say in the last year has that actually started happening, where the recognition is now it's ML in production. So it's also an interesting one because as you start paying attention to stuff, it's pretty easy to be early into things, but you might be in an empty room for a while, just waiting for everyone to show up. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get it. I mean, I'm excited. Like, there are so many cool technology. Like, first of all, there's like this like explosion of new technologies, and so it's so impossible to like keep track of everything. So you kind of have to pick a few trends that you're interested in. But I do think like there are some really neat trends. Like, I think we're essentially shifting from the your data stack being a stack to make business decisions, to make analysis, to kind of pull lists, send emails occasionally, to like actually like real production systems. And I think like I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, I feel like the DevOps for ML, now we're seeing essentially DevOps and infrastructure for like, what does it mean to build a production system powered by data? Because that's what all these companies want to do. Like, Snowflake wants to be, you know, the kind of the AWS or Oracle of data that everyone's building off of. You know, Looker wants to be not building dashboards in your app. They want to be using Looker and using their Powered by Looker. Fivetran has Powered by Fivetran. They essentially want to be components of a production stack, like not just, hey, I'm building my BI stack, but hey, I'm a startup building a ground up like data product, and I'm not going to put it on AWS. I'm going to put it on Snowflake and
mhm.
Looker and Fivetran, and that's it. And like, I think that's the extreme, but I also think you're just going to see more production systems in just companies in general. And so you're going to need testing. You're going to need kind of um, data discovery, data lineage, monitoring, all these kind of things that, and also just more money and more people put into the stack to kind of get it to those five nines, because we don't typically build data stacks to deliver five nines of uptime. We do it to like two nines, three nines, like enough for you to make a good decision. But like, companies have not historically spent money in terms of people or tooling to get that technology to the right place. Like, I think that's like the biggest trend that we're going to see in the next couple of years. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I agree. The changes really are, I would say, the changes that you saw in development as well as software engineering, where back in the day it was the IT director or the CTO or the CIO who was kind of top down, um, you know, telling people what technologies they're going to use, right? The development teams and whatnot. That's changed a lot. Now it's the development teams that are filtering the cool stuff up because the development teams are just closer to the solutions, right? And
Yeah.
so and closer to the problems that they're solving. And so you're definitely seeing a bubbling up. And the same thing's starting to happen in data. I mean, data. I mean, I've seen some antiquated data stacks. I'm sure you have too. And these were all things that the CIO had bought back in like I don't know 2000s or the 90s or whatever.
I
And
feel like you can cut a company's data stack open just like a tree, and you can
mhm,
kind of like date it by like what it's inside and how many
yeah.
rings.
And normally in our case, it's you can cut the tree, and you can also see on the outer edges of the bark where it caught on fire. So um,
And someone used some duct tape.
right. So but now it's you're almost flipping the funnel in that sense, right? Where data teams are starting to develop their own data stacks and using best of breed tools, whether that's off the shelf stuff like Fivetran, Looker, or rolling their own, using like Superset or
Mhm.
Preset, or any number of things like that. And I think it's really cool. The analytics engineering, I think, is opening up a lot of possibilities in this area too, where you got DBT,
Mhm.
great expectations,
Yes.
things that you can plug in as code, and so that's going to be a movement. It also sort of changes the role of the analyst in some ways, right? I mean, so how are you going to mix being a domain expert along with all these newfangled tools that have come out? So
Well, figure it out. Yep.
yeah,
I know, but that's fun. Like, again, I don't know. I'm sure there will be some point when we are actually old, when we not just like pretending we're old, um, when we don't want to keep up with this pace of change. But I just frankly think it's exciting. It's exciting to see new technologies pop up to chat with, founders who are just starting off and building a data platform and like genuinely asking the community for ideas and to see those technologies and those teams grow. I'm excited. Like I do feel like we're going to be looking back at this time as a very magical and special time where, the folks like, again, like I think this is I don't think this highly of us, but like, when you look at those pictures of you see like Steve Jobs and all those folks like early in the days, hanging out at the same like, you know, meetups, like again, I think, t- the community is like locally optimistic. You're seeing the future leaders and executives of and founders of really cool companies. Um, and I think we're going to look back to a very special time with like, shit, this is like when we just started talking about this thing called an analytics engineer. Or this is when, this person, remember when this person like demoed this and or asked for feedback and now it's like $1 billion company. I think that we're going to see, I mean, again, it's not going to be everyone, but I do think we're going to look back and think of this as a very, very special point in time
Oh yeah,
that we were very fortunate to be a part of.
totally agree. It's kind of funny. It reminds me of this time when I think it was Taylor from Fivetran emailed me. I think it was 2015, 2016 maybe. At any rate, he emailed. He did a cold email and he was telling me about this new thing called Fivetran. I was like, what the hell is that? Like, why would you? I'm doing ETL still, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the idea of like ELT seemed kind of it sort of made sense. But he's like, oh, I'll give it to you, maybe like $100 a month or something. And I'm like, I think we're good, man. So,
You should have locked in that rate.
right. But it goes to show too. I mean, it's almost as if you can get so steeped in your own paradigms that you sort of miss what's next. I think that experience taught me a lot. Where it does pay attention. It does pay attention to new ways of doing stuff. And I think what's going on right now is absolutely to your point. It's um, you're definitely in this weird inflection point right now
Mm.
because more people getting into data, just the combinatorial effects of that, plus more people getting engineering skills, uh, will mean a lot of new products and a lot of new ways of doing stuff that we probably haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah.
When I talk to founders of data companies, for example, it's kind of crazy because these are all like really smart, well pedigreed people getting investments from some of the biggest VC funds out there. And for any sub niche in data, there's like a dozen or more of these companies, all with
Yeah.
the same teams and great funding and everything. So I have
Yeah.
no idea who. I don't think I'm smart enough to figure out like who wins in this one.
No,
So,
we neither of us are. I would just make friends with everyone. Um, yeah, I, it's exciting. I think the one thing that like I'm interested about the paradigm shift as we shift from batch to streaming. That's the
mhm.
thing that like I genuinely feel least prepared for.
I mean, how so?
I mean, at least I mean the whole world, this whole ELT world, is based on kind of batch. Fivetran batches it to Snowflake. dbt runs, your Looker dashboards cache on your following the data groups like settings. Like everything is batch and built to do that. You know, I mean, yes, people can move to incremental dbt models. Yes, you can run your Fivetran ingestion more often, which theoretically won't drive up the cost, but it will kill your Snowflake bill because Snowflake's always going to be running. It's just like I don't know. I think just this concept of just like dealing with streaming is not only a technology shift, but just like a a mind shift, um, a shift of mind. Just because like I think it's really easy to visualize this kind of stepwise batch type like dependency graph. This just like streaming pipeline. And I think this is probably more your world, and I'm just demonstrating my lack of depth necessary, but like I felt like streaming. Yes, every company would be better would get more value by moving to streaming. For most companies, it is not worth it because it's too much work. If you're Uber and you need to know where a vehicle is right now, totally makes sense. But and so like I just think there's going to be this kind of shift in the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years, where streaming is going to be as easy as batch is, and I think we will all have to re-educate ourselves. Maybe there's like this like retrofit, like looks like feels like batch, but actually is streaming behind the scenes that's going to happen. But I don't know. I think that's going to be the biggest shift we're going to see. Everything else feels like it's just kind of playing into this ELT shift. I just think streaming is going to be a whole nother like step change.
Yeah, it will be for sure. I think it's going to be in ways that aren't directly obvious either. Actually, one of my meetups about a year ago, this guy Bobby Calderwood gave a really, really good talk on event-driven architectures, and I was
Hmm.
fascinated by some of his thesis where it was, I've seen this before in other places, and it sort of reinforced the point where at some point, like, why do you even need a database at all?
Yeah.
Right? Why don't you just stream events into a stream from your application and just bypass the database entirely? And so I definitely think there's going to be a paradigm shift, and then it sort of this is where I think it impacts analytics, for example, right? So
Hmm.
the question I always ask people when they ask for real-time analytics is, okay, so if you have information showing up um, every half second in
Yeah.
a dashboard, what action are you going to take
Exactly.
against that dashboard, right? The answer is, well, be more informed. And I'm like, no, at that point, you're going to write a bot or some machine learning algorithm to handle that stream because you literally don't have the mental bandwidth to react.
Hmm.
And so, and so I think analytics, it sort of poses this interesting thing for analytics where historically, analytics has been very well historical looking, right? So you're
Yeah.
looking backwards to get trends um, and see how your business is doing. So in that context, I do have skepticism about real-time analytics in terms of how it's going to impact, I'd say, the broad analytics world, just for that very reason. It's like, even if you had all the information in the world up to the second, like, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm thinking more like real time data stack, like powering personalization
Yeah,
and
well, that
like
one, yeah, for sure. Um,
and just like I think it's going to get so easy that we're going to be like, of course it's up to the second. Like what do you mean you have a job that runs every 4 hours?
right.
Of course, you know, of course the dashboard represents, the current state of the world. And we're actually going to look back at this like weird kind of like early stages of cloud modern data stack that was batch based as like super old fashioned.
Hmm. I could see that happening. I mean, it's interesting too. You got some like I think Google Cloud does a really good job of data flow, for example, their
Hmm.
product that basically handles batch and streaming with the same code base. That's cool. Um, and so you might see some new paradigm, or I wouldn't say new, but that paradigm being adopted elsewhere. I think Flink does something very similar. Um, but it's going to be an adjustment if you're coming from the batch oriented mindset to wrap your head around the fact that everything is now a stream and you just subscribe to it and you get your data that way.
Yeah.
That's a really big mental shift. And the fact that you could do transformations in flight, for example, that's a big mental shift. So I don't know what that does to ELT, for example.
I mean, are
Um,
we back to ETL essentially?
I don't, I can make a strong argument that he actually never left ETL when he did ELT.
Make it. I want to hear it.
Well, okay, so in ELT, I mean, you have extract, load, transform, um, but and ETL is extract, transform, load. I mean, the transformation step number goes away. I think the order of
It's
operations doesn't
ETL.
go away.
It's ETL ELT.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
exactly.
saying? Yeah.
Basically, yeah. Um, and so, but I think ELT is it's a convenient acronym, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we recommend this to most, I would say nearly all of our clients unless they have like a really good reason not to do it. But
Actually, what do you think about like Starburst and like was it now Trino? Is that what we're
oh
calling it
yeah,
now? Wait, Trino,
Starburst plug. Um,
the open source kind of project formerly known as Presto, like
Presto
the
SQL,
like
yeah.
not moving data, like not even moving the data. You know what I mean? Like, in what cases do you recommend that?
I recommend using something like Presto. I mean, for full disclosure, we're partners with Starburst.
I figured someone gave.
Yeah.
I figured you didn't pay for that mug.
I don't pay for a lot of things, my swag. But it's Presto. I think has a really good use case if you want to unify various data sources together, right? So a good use case is we have a lot of companies with like a data lake over here, then they got like Snowflake over here, and they're going to move a maybe BigQuery over here and a bunch of different databases. I think it does a really good job of just consolidating everything into one view of analytics. At the same time, maybe the one possible downside, which I'm sure they're working on, is the fact that you can't take advantage of the native capabilities of the database. So say, if you have like a true real-time analytics database like Druid, for
Hmm.
example, that's like, is meant for low latency real-time queries.
Yeah,
Um,
your hot data.
hot data, right? So Presto's not going to be able to take advantage of the hot data as hot as Druid could, right? So
Mm.
that's sort of what you miss out on. But if that's not that big of a deal to you, then I could, there's a reason that Presto's growing and Starburst is growing a lot right now. It's
Yeah.
because you want to unify your data. And maybe that's one approach that the it gets more widely adopted. It's hard to say. I mean, it's this huge land grab right now. On the flip side, you have
Yeah.
Databricks, which just raised a bunch of money at like 28 billion. I'm sure when they IPO, they're going to go head to head with Snowflake at some crazy ass valuation.
Yep.
And
I'm sure that's what the people that just gave them $1 billion are betting on.
well, yeah, and if you notice, the clouds funded that too,
Yeah.
right? So that was kind of interesting. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's interesting for us because we're watching kind of history play out in real time, and
Yeah.
I don't know where it shakes out. That's why
And
I'm
it's
invested
harder to
here.
like again I feel really comfortable with this ELT paradigm, but I really am evaluating things like Starburst, kind of streaming as kind of alternatives or complements. You know what I mean? Like I think
Yeah,
reality it's going to be the where we land is going to be somewhere in the middle in a combination. Uh, I'm just intrigued. Like you said, I think history play out right in front of us. I don't know what the play is, but I'm intrigued. Like again, like I actually find myself very, very fortunate that it is so easy for us, like in the kind of consulting side of the world, to play with new tools. I
hmm
mean, like you said, like you've got partner relationships with these folks who are giving you kind of sandboxes, but also we've got clients that who have real world problems that like can actually genuinely be solved and not just like made a little bit better, but like a lot better. Like
hmm
again, migrating someone off Redshift to Snowflake can save them so much money and be so much like can be a better in every single way. And so just I regularly have opportunities to kind of work with Snowflake. And like literally like if I'm working with a company that has multiple data sets that are kind of all around the company, like I'm excited to kind of bring in Starburst and play with that technology. I do feel very fortunate that I'm like kind of in a kid in a candy store and I can just play around with all the cool tools.
yeah,
It's fun.
it is fun, and this doesn't even include new technologies coming out of places like China,
Yes.
Russia, right? So like ClickHouse, that's from Yandex. It's Russian. Then you got Kylan, Apache Kylan, which is like from like a Shanghai company. And that thing is super performant, but nobody knows about it here. Over in China, it's got a
Yeah.
lot of
I,
share,
I,
right?
I honestly,
So
I think like my stretch, and I think that's like one of my stretch goals is to become more like comfortable and knowledgeable about like the China data scene. Just because like phenomenal machine learning products, machine learning like infrastructure. You know, I do think we have to worry about, I think, regulations and trade related regulations. Like I I don't think we're going to be using those technologies anytime soon in the US, just because I think there are political reasons. But I think there's going to be a world where like you're just going to see true like Databricks, Snowflake competitors, the like Alibaba Cloud, like like
Hmm.
those things are real. I think we're prevented from actually using them in practice now because of political issues. But again, 2 to 5 years from, like 3 to 5 years from now, I think they're going to be such a big part of the market that you will like have to be knowledgeable with them.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, China itself is set to overtake the U.S. economy in about 5 years, right? So, whenever I'd go to China too, I was always fascinated just by even how people use mobile phones differently than they do here, right? Um, Everything is paid for with QR codes. You don't carry cash. Like that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Credit cards will look at you like you're 80, and
Yeah.
if you pull one out, they're like, I have no idea what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so everything's with the phone. I mean, I distinctly remember walking around Wuhan actually in December of last year, um, trying to find something to eat in the morning, and I couldn't actually pay for anything because all I had were just a bunch of like bills, and nobody takes bills. So
That's so funny.
yeah, yeah. But at the flip side, I mean that I'd say I've read things where there's the impression is production machine learning, for example, in China is like light years ahead of where it is in the U.S.
Yeah.
Period. But there's also ulterior motives for the data. So it's kind of like, well, what do you want? And yeah, and what's also interesting is, COVID's also exposed me to quite a few people from all over the world. So I'll do these events where we got people from Africa,
Hmm.
India. Actually speaking at a meetup in India in a couple of months.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And just the number of technologists and analytics people out there is staggering.
Yeah.
You think the U.S. is big. The U.S. is actually a really small pond compared to the rest of the world. I think the rest of the world is looking at the U.S. currently as a leader in the data space, but uh, it's going to become a lot more decentralized, I think. So,
I mean, I think it's going to decent. I would say that from a technical leadership, it's going to be kind of like there's going to be the Chinese kind of sphere of data cloud and the U.S. kind of Western sphere. I think practitioners will kind of play in both. I think U.S. practitioners will play in the U.S. cloud, Chinese cloud, and then you'll have places like Africa, kind of South America that are kind of playing in both. Honestly, I think it's going to very much mirror like kind of politics and where soft power currently aligns.
right.
But I do think from a practitioner perspective, yes, we actually, for example, at Brooklyn Data, we're a team of 17. I think 11 people in the U.S., uh, one Canada, one El Salvador, one Brazil, two Nigeria, and one in Kenya.
Wow.
And again, like we don't have the this team and the that team. We put up a job description and hired the best person, and they
Right.
just happen to be in these places. And they're like, there's no offshore. Like, I mean, we are truly just one team, and we just hired the best people, and I think that's really exciting and powerful because like I love the diversity of opinion. I love the diversity of culture. Like just truly just having a diverse group of people from a diverse backgrounds. Um, I think the one kind of challenge is as there are kind of barriers to data leaving the U.S. sometimes, like healthcare data, financial data. Like those are that's where I think we're going to get stuck in this like true globalization. Like, and I think like you and I can hire folks around the world very comfortably, but I think practically speaking, a lot of companies cannot, especially in the data space, just because of the limitations of kind of data security and hiring.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, the other thing I noticed too is just there's a lot of people who want to learn data.
Yes.
So many. Um, Especially in India, it's um, yeah, data science is all the rage. But in there, I mean, that country, it's super competitive too, right? Like you're competing against um,
Yeah, unlike us
everybody.
schlubs that kind of just like dumb luck managed to be in the right
Right.
time, right place. They actually are smart and working hard, unlike us.
It's there's a lot of truth to this. So um, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in terms of walk me through your talent acquisition though. Like, how do you go about like how do you know that you found a good hire?
Well, I mean, so I think there's like one aspect is like there's just like a we work with clients who trust us. At Brooklyn Data, we work with clients who trust us to keep their data secure. And so I think before you can even start to truly think about hiring a remote workforce, you have to put the foundation in place. And that's technology and process. So it's like, everybody at Brooklyn Data has a company-owned laptop. Um, it's encrypted, can be remotely wiped. We use YubiKeys for two-factor security. We have 4 redundant VPNs each in a different region, cloud region. Um, like we have password managers and kind of other software that helps to keep us safe. And again, that's just kind of I have laptops at Brooklyn Data that are just around, not in an office, they're at people's homes. And I think you have to just put that security in place. You
Hmm.
also have to put the mechanisms of like background checking folks, really reference checking people. Again, because, 2/3 of the team I haven't met. But I think once you put that foundation in place, and again, you can't skimp. Like this stuff is expensive. We spend a lot of money on IT, background checks, insurance, security. Um, but once you have that foundation, I think you have a lot more flexibility to go and truly hire the best people. And so what we do is we literally put a job description on our website. For the first, I would say 3 to 4 weeks, we only post on job boards targeted at underrepresented groups. Um, we on the job description itself, it tells you exactly what the salary is and the recruitment process. We run a blind recruitment process. We don't accept resumes. You answer 4 questions that are about the job. We review that without seeing your name or any details about you. Um, we then de-anonymize you to get to the next step, and then we do kind of a phone screen and then a panel interview where we share the questions ahead of time, and then kind of a final conversation with me. I think what we've done there is like really focused on creating a process that is equitable and doesn't kind of give extra points just because you can think on your feet, and essentially know is a process that allows for and encourages diversity in all shapes and forms. Um, I think just folks have really appreciated that. Like we try to be really upfront. We're still early. We're still figuring it out. We're only a 2.5 year old company, but I think that's really exciting for people. And so I think us running a really great, equitable, and fair recruitment process ensures that we get great candidates, get a great diverse pool, and build a team of passionate individuals that love what they do. Um, I actually, to be very funny, like I've learned a lot about this kind of style of recruitment and interviewing, and it's been a real learning journey for me. What I find is we often will help our clients hire folks, and we will be involved with the resume screening step. And honestly, like I struggle to screen a resume now. I'm like, this isn't at all related to the job. Like I wish they could just answer these 4 job-related questions and I can judge them. And like, so honestly, like it feels so weird, but I feel like we, like in some ways, it might be a little bit more work to set up this kind of blind recruitment process to start with, but it actually makes it far easier and aligns like the process with the job. So, I mean, again, we think so much about this because, again, like we're not a business that sells WYSIWYGs. We're a business like our value is people and process and our intellectual property and our learnings, our knowledge. And so the biggest component is our people. And again, that being said, I think every company should focus on kind of being just so thoughtful in their kind of recruitment and kind of efforts. But again, it is just so core to our being because our people are our product, and it's, and again, we spend a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of just general effort on this. I would do it again and over again in a heartbeat because it truly is. It has made all the difference in running a company and creating a place where I want to work every day.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it seems like you've really hit on something where it's just sort of like recruiting cultural fit, right? But it fits with your company, is what I'm saying. Like because I've seen hiring at other places, I'm sure you have too, where it's almost like they just got like a hiring for dummies book and just went through that
Yes.
without attaching it to, okay, so here's our values, here's the culture of a company, right? And it's hard to separate those. And the resume screening thing too, like I do the same thing. Companies, will have us look at resumes, and I'm like, I don't, it's a challenging thing because I'm not sure on a skill level. Sure, I can maybe assess if this person has this skills, but there's also the cultural component too. Like, is this person going to be a fit in your company? And I have no idea. I'm gonna have to leave that to the hiring manager to figure that out, right? So, but
Yeah.
in that process, you might overlook somebody who's awesome, who would have been awesome from, I think, a cultural, like a tolerability standpoint,
Tolerability.
versus just having great skills. Because at the end of the day, too, you definitely want to hire people that you can work with.
Yeah.
So,
And collaborate with, again, like, especially, for us and everybody right now, it's like this remote world, like, there are just people, it's, we're all working from home right now, or the vast majority of us, and some folks are just itching to get back in the office. And so some people are just kind of made for remote, and some people need that true in-person contact. And so, like, you like, you want to make sure you're hiring people that can do the job, you know, technically hard and soft skills, but also like want to work in the remote environment. And for us, it's just so important to surface that. And we have a lot of folks that have worked remote before, or folks that are just like remote converts, I would say. Though I guess we're all kind of remote converts right now, but like folks that really, for whatever reason, have gotten to a stage of their life where they don't want to do that hour commute, or they value flexibility, or actually they're kind of introverts and they've always wanted to work from home, but have never, they didn't want to be the eighth person in the meeting and the only person that's on the dialing in. Like that's a real thing. And again, we're going to see a lot of that as we flip back to this hybrid world, um, when people start going back to work. So it's really just it's can someone thrive in the environment? I think that's so important to find out.
yeah, and it's almost like you have to be intentional about remote from day one, or be
Yes.
intentional about reconfiguring it now that we've all had basically a shotgun wedding with working remote. So,
Yes.
um, but you definitely see companies that just aren't genetically fit for doing remote work, and that's just how it is. I know people that work at pretty old school companies where it's all about being in the office. It's all about being in meeting rooms and stuff, and
It's
this
hard. I mean, again,
it's
like it's
hard.
also hard to build a remote culture, and it's hard to change to remote culture. It isn't like,
Hmm.
well, it's like, when all the companies shifted open plan offices, it also happened to save them a lot of money. Um, I think people can similarly say, like, let's shift to remote. We won't have to have any office, or we'll have a small office where people have a hot desk. That sounds fucking miserable if it's not done well.
Oh
Sorry, you
yeah,
probably have to censor that.
no, it's fine.
It sounds like true. Like, can you imagine, like, the hot desking could be really cool, like where you've got like a coffee shop environment, you've got a quiet room and like lots of big monitors, or it could be a place where you feel like you have no connection, it's cold, it's sterile, like you have to spend, and I'm not saying like go WeWork and build like these beautiful places to work, but maybe like it isn't, you know, let's just cut the office. It's let's invest in all the other things that make us special, and make people want to work here and make people productive. And it's hard work, like remote communication norms. Um, you know, just checking if people are okay and their energy levels. Like, what is a check-in? Your check-ins actually have to serve a much bigger purpose, like your one-on-ones when you're going remote. It's not just like, hey, I've seen you all freaking day. Let's just spend a focused minute to like talk about tactical things. It's like, hey, how's your energy level? Like, how's your stress level? How's your learning? How's your excitement? Like, it needs to be kind of like a much broader check-in to gauge how your remote team member is doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the nature of one-on-ones definitely changed, I imagine. So it's I know with my one-on-ones, whenever I do them, it was always a standard set of questions every week. Go through the same ones, right? Um, and that worked really well. But yeah, I can imagine right now it's a different
We can
environment for a
still
lot
have
of
to do the
people.
standard questions, but
Yeah.
it has to pull a little bit more weight and cover
Hmm.
more things.
Yeah, that's
You can,
interesting.
I mean, it's just like anything. You can't, the larger company, the more it becomes a cargo ship and not a speedboat, and it's hard to move the company. It's hard to change the culture. It's like when companies hire 150 data scientists and like we're a data-driven company now. It's like, why'd you even do it? Like, you know, it, do they know what they're doing? Are they plugged into the company? Do they like, you know, you can't just say you're doing X and then do X. You have to be thoughtful and just like put real work in.
Hmm. That's a lot of work. So
Yeah.
culture is hard, and everything. Yeah, everything about it's hard. Well, cool. I think we're coming up on time, but anything you want to close with?
I, I would just close by like first of all saying thank you for this was
Yeah, of
fun.
course,
I mean
man.
this is like a more extended version of our monthly check-in,
Basically, yeah.
recorded. Um, but also like this is an exciting time. Use the communities, use the people around you. Like I cannot overemphasize how amazing it is to be able to reach out to folks on Locally Optimistic or other Slack groups or other just communities to ask for help, and it's so supportive. You know, truly don't hesitate to reach out. If you have a thoughtful question, you should feel comfortable reaching out to anybody in the community because they've been there. And so that's my parting words. Just like use your communities, be a great community member, give, pay it forward, and I think we'll all be better for it.
Cool. Well, thanks, Scott, and thanks for all you do for the community too. I think it's awesome. So, and yeah, we'll have to do another one of these again. It's always
Perfect.
good to catch up.
Cool.
So, awesome, man. Well, until then, we'll see you later.
See ya.
All right,
Bye.
take care.